And Jack, how about you? Are you ready now?
Okay, this is part two of our Build Along series of the Ipswich Hobby Section House. This is a prototype that was once upon a time in Ipswich, Massachusetts. We have ended last week. We had done some of the framing around the doors and various walls, and we're building in three scales, obviously, which is something I'd never done before, build three different scales at the same time. One of the things that I did not mention last week, uh, we often distress wood prior to a build. Sometimes we do it during the process. Sometimes we wait until it's finished and we scrape some a wire brush, which is what I typically do before we do the weathering. But one of the things I want to point out here is I mentioned it briefly last week. I think people too often overdo the lifting of clapboards. And down at the lower left in this scene, you'll see this beat up old section house, which is our prototype. You see one board lifted and maybe one next to it starting to come up, hardly anything. And on the sides that I could see, there were no other boards lifted. But the other thing I want to point out here is very often we use a punch tool, punch wheel, to make some nail holes. And you see a little illustration in the top right-hand side of the slide. In the prototype photograph that you see, I don't see any nail holes. So the only time that I use a punch wheel and create some nail holes in my walls is if I'm building a kit for an AP evaluation. Because my reality is that if you get something on a layout and you're 3 or 4 feet away, you're not going to see nail holes unless you get really sharp eyes or you drip some maybe rust out of the hole or something to make it pop out a little bit. And razor saw, the old Zurin, I think it is, razor saw I use quite a bit to distress some wood. Use that on some of the strip wood. N scale, the N scale model has no glass mullions. There's no windows per se. Everything was just all boarded up. The prototype, when I photographed it over two different occasions and had some other prototype photographs from others, it was always boarded up. So in the N scale, everything is so delicate anyway. We simply provided the parts that you see in the top left photograph. And on the main almost completed photograph, on the top, that small window, I'm guessing that probably was to add a little light to a loft that might have been inside the window. But you just shave down that framing and you can fit that little shutter or piece of plywood just to block out that window. And down below, we call it a shutter because there's a couple of hinges that were on the original. I didn't think it made any sense to have hinges on that, but that was on the prototype, so that's what we produced here. And in this N-scale version, we put the framing on the inside of the window casement. There's no glass, there's no acetate mullions. We just glue the plywood over that window. On the HO version, we provide, as you can see in the center top, we do provide the option of having the opportunity to board up the windows. But what I've done and what I prefer, frankly, even though it's not prototypical in the era that I photographed the actual prototype, but we provide the peel and stick self-adhesive, and you'll see it at the very top, this item here. It's sort of a yellowish color in the photograph. Those are the two-part windows. The U shape is the framing that goes around each of the windows. And you'll see that there's a total of, 4. You have the two, I'll call them lofted windows, the two top windows, and then of course the main windows. Everybody calls the models windows that we get double hung, but I think technically they're really single hung since you can only move one of the sashes, the lower sash. So the first thing you do is peel off the backing of the windowsill itself. It's self-adhesive, just sticks right on to the base of each of the windows on each side. Then what I do is peel off the backing of the two-part windows themselves, and you cut out the acetate. It's already laser cut to fit, and those go right onto the back side of the adhesive on the mullions on the windows. And you can model them so that the windows are open or fully closed. The O-scale version, you can see here on the left, I've modeled it so it's partly open on the bottom. That photograph on the right shows the various pieces that I was referring to. These are painted now, of course. These are the window framings on the top. The 1 and 2 pieces for each of the main windows. The top loft windows, they're just one window with 4 square, 4-piece window. And of course the window sills at the bottom. Those are the pieces that you peel off, all adhesive back. And as I give a shout out to Father Ron a while ago when he was reviewing this, I had one error in the instructions. You only put on the HO scale the framing on the windows if you were going to board them up. If you're not going to board them up, you don't need to frame the windows. You just simply use these adhesive parts and everything fits perfectly on those. And part 3, next week, we're going to be installing the doors, and we'll go vertical with a wall assembly. And May 1st, we're going to do the roof and final details and show some of the bills from our customers. So unless you have any questions, we got the windows in, and we had done the framing, most of the framing last week. And with that, I will see you next week. We'll go vertical next week.
Jack, I appreciate it very much. That's a great little structure. I mean, it's small enough where you could put that almost anywhere.
Yes, you can. And
regardless of what scale you're in.
Yeah, and when you see some of the customer builds, you'll see that they've repurposed some of them, and they have all kinds of different colors. So a lot of creativity in some of the models that I've seen so far from customers.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so very much for being here this evening. See you next week.
Thank you, Jim.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.